Hello, welcome to another episode of Gimme Empathy. I'm your host, Scott Mercer. How are you? That's a rhetorical question. I have a microphone and you have headphones or earbuds or speakers and you can't talk to me through them. I'm just teasing you. Thanks for tuning in for another week. Very excited about this episode I've got for you this week. This kicks off a 4-part series of very special podcasts that are recorded in Melbourne last month. Last month being July 2017 for those time travelers listening from the future. I was in Melbourne visiting my sister Miranda, staying with her and her husband Andrew and daughter Madeline. And I took advantage of being down there to record some podcasts with some people I hadn't seen for a while, including the first guest today, who is my sister Miranda. Miranda, or Mindy, as I know her, had just moved house when we recorded this into a new place in East St Kilda. I wasn't sure how the acoustics would go because it was a big room, high ceilings, echoey tiled floor, but I think it went pretty well. These Melbourne podcasts were the first ones I'd ever recorded outside of my own little lounge room. So if they sound any different, that's why. Their place was in surprisingly organized condition, given they just moved about a week beforehand and that they have an 18-month-old toddler running around, opening drawers and throwing things places. My niece Maddie, one of her favorite games while I was there was to take a book out of her little bookshelf. She's got all these little board books to toddle over to me. It's funny, toddlers actually toddle. That's their method of locomotion. They don't walk, they toddle. So she would toddle over to me, give me a book and look at me expectantly. So I would open it up and start to read. Then she would toddle back to her bookcase and bring out another one and bring it over. I think we clearly had different ideas in mind of what books are for. I'm not sure which one of us is right, really. What else can I tell you? Probably best just to have Mindy speak for herself. But she's, for context, she's my older sister by about 3 years. She's lived a lot of places in her life. She's very well travelled, along with her husband. She met Andrew while they were both studying at Nottingham University in the UK. And she did, in fact, actually meet the real Sheriff of Nottingham while she was over there. How are my intros going? Because I've changed things up a bit. I used to do them slouched in my reclining computer chair, but I've started to do them standing up. And I'm wondering if that's made a difference. I started last week. And the other thing I'm doing is while I'm talking to you, I'm actually listening to classical music on my headphones. I find it distracts from the fact that I'm talking to myself in an otherwise empty L-shaped flat. It feels more comfortable to me anyway. Let me know if you preferred slouched croaky Scott or if you can hear any classical music bleeding through my headphones. Anyway, here's episode 11, my sister Miranda Hurst.
I would much prefer that and also then you don't, if you binge something, you don't kind of have that, I like that excitement after each episode because then you actually fully debrief on the one episode and go, oh, what was that? Where does that fit in? Where's this going? Whereas if you can just watch the whole thing, you kind of lose that, loses something for me.
And with some are really designed to really watch. It's like they want you to watch the entire series once it's out, like House of Cards, for example. I started watching the new season recently and I had no idea what was going on. They throw you in without anything. And those seasons, I think, not only the episodes you're meant to watch them back to back, but even seasons.
So you're basically going to sit there. What's House of Cards up to, 5 or 6?
Yeah, 5, I think.
So you're supposed to have watched all 5 seasons in one.
And because also the episodes don't even have names. It's just chapter 60, chapter 61.
Oh, wow. So it's not even season 5, episode 1.
It's not even like the one with Ross and Rachel's wedding. It's not convenient like that.
Oh, dear. Yeah, no, that's not... I'm old school. I don't have time to binge anything, sadly. But I miss that kind of being able to talk to people about it because everyone will be for example, I think everyone at the moment is talking about Handmaid's Tale, which I haven't even started watching. And I'm sure by the time I watch the first episode, people will have been through the whole series and be over it, and they'll be on to the next new thing.
Yeah.
So either I'm always behind, or I always miss something, which is fine, except that I actually like that debriefing with people about a show. I like the I don't know, because I think that makes it a bit more of a social aspect. Otherwise, you're just sitting in your dark bunker watching TV.
Yeah, and Handmaid's Tale, I'm nearly up to the end of the first season. That's really intense.
I've heard that it's really intense, and actually you don't want to binge watch it. Like 1 or 2 episodes at a time is a good amount.
Yeah, I can't do any more than that. And it's scary because you feel like it's so close to where we are now, especially in the flashback scenes. Like they just little touches, like they'll mention that, my Uber's late. It's like, that's Uber. That Uber might not be around in 5 years. This probably starts soon.
And does that make it all the more interesting because the original book was written in like the mid-80s? So I haven't watched it, so I can't really talk about it in that way. But I'm just really curious that people think, oh no, it's happening now.
Well, I think the idea, and Margaret Atwood has said that the idea when she wrote it was that even though it's set in a dystopian future, she made it clear it wasn't too far into the future from when she wrote it, by not having any, crazy new technology or any...
There's not flying cars or anything.
No, exactly. And she really wanted to ground it and make it clear that this could be happening now somewhere. I mean, there are versions of The Handmaid's Tale that are happening in other parts of the world already.
And that were, 30 years ago when she wrote it, potentially she could have been talking about now. Yeah,
exactly. I normally start by asking my guests who they are and how they know me.
So, I have known you your entire life. I am your older sister, Miranda.
What's your first memory you have of me?
Oh, it's really interesting because I feel like I don't have a lot of really clear childhood memories at all. Like certainly not even early primary school, really. And I think a lot of the memories I do have, I feel are because they're from a story that's been told a couple of times.
Right.
Or from a photo or something. Like I don't really think they're necessarily real memories. Like I can think of like photos of you as like a toddler when we lived at Bald Hills.
There are quite a few photos of us together. Yeah, when I was a toddler, you would have been 3 or 4, and you always look like you're having a real fun time playing with me.
Oh, great!
And like you're it's funny because you're looking at the camera and smiling, so you've got that cognizance. You're by that age that when someone's taking a picture, you look and you smile, and later on you get to look back at it. But I'm still a baby, and I don't know what's going on. I'm just like looking off, kind of dazed.
But yeah, I don't really remember any of that, to be honest.
A clear early memory, this was when we were at Highgate Hill. I'm not sure what age we were, but I remember we were running all around the house, like down the stairs on the stone steps down the side of the house, then up the back steps, up the veranda, all through the house and back again. You were chasing after me, and we were playing some game, but then like I started like wailing and crying as I was running, and then like you started wailing and crying as well. And then Mum stopped us and she said to me, "Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because Miranda's chasing me." And then she asked you, "Well, why are you crying?" And she said, "Because Scott's crying."
Clearly I'm a sensitive type. I have absolutely no memory of that.
How has your binge watching of things changed since you had your daughter about, she's 18 months now?
Yeah, nearly 18 months. Definitely changed, dropped off. I suppose even before I had Maddie, I wasn't that much of a binge watcher. Like binging would be probably 3 episodes at once. Probably one of the main reasons I wasn't is because I find it so hard to find something that Andrew and I both want to watch. So in the evenings, we'll both be around and we kind of want to be doing something together, even if it is just watching TV. But it's so hard to find something that we both want to watch. So then my binge watching would be if he was out or maybe on a Saturday morning when he used to go for a ride. Whereas now, certainly none during the day, it will literally be an occasion when Maddie's asleep and Andrew's out.
Have there been any shows that either of you have kind of stopped watching altogether because you don't have time anymore and the other partner isn't into it?
I can't think specifically of any shows that I've just stopped watching because I don't have time. I think there are a lot of shows that I haven't started because I haven't had the time. So there are a lot that have come and I've thought, oh yeah, I could probably at least give that a try. I think anything I've stopped watching is usually, I kind of have a rule that anything that goes after 5 seasons is just, I drop off.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of that, but that's probably true.
It's not a deliberate thing. I don't go, oh, season 5, see you later. But I find that pretty much universally that's when things go downhill, if they haven't beforehand.
Or even if they don't, it's like you've seen what the show does.
Yeah, because I feel like, I guess all shows generally start with the central, if they've got a big story arc, they've generally wrapped it up by season 5 and are onto a new one.
Yeah.
Or if they haven't wrapped it up, then it's problematic because they've dragged it out too long, they've totally lost the plot.
Or if it's not something that's based on a story arc, if it's a comedy, like I remember 30 Rock, which I think ran for 7 seasons in the end. It just stopped making me laugh, not because the jokes weren't as funny, because I was so familiarized to the pattern, to the rhythm of from setup to punchline.
Yeah, because I think with a comedy like that, I more drop in and out. It's not something I'd feel like you need to watch the series necessarily in the right order, although, I mean, I guess to a degree you do. But I find it easier just to drop in and drop out of something like that. So I wouldn't say I've ever really binge watched a comedy. I find it more for drama where you are trying to, you've got to be more focused to follow the story arc, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Before you had Maddie, were you a very routine-based person?
Yeah, I think I still am a pretty routine-based person. I was a routine-based person in the sense of, pretty much get up at the same time, go to work, we meal plan what we have for dinner. Kind of if we've planned what we have for dinner and someone says, oh, hey, want to come out and grab something to eat, probably kind of freak out a little bit, like, no, don't mess with my plans. What am I going to do with this meat I've defrosted?
Yeah.
So, yeah, yes, routine.
Babies and toddlers aren't necessarily great at sticking to routines.
They're not great at sticking to the routines, but they actually, the parenting powers that be, say that routines are actually really important for babies and for kids because they come into the world, they don't know what they're supposed to do. So you actually need to give them quite a strong routine so they know what happens next. So we've got, during the day, I wouldn't say we really have much of a routine for Maddie, but certainly at night, it's dinner, bath, book, bed, and that's quite a clear routine in the way we do everything. It happens at pretty much the same time every night. So if anything, we're probably a little bit more routine.
And does she respond to, does she now expect, oh, this is the time I'm going to have a bath, and she's okay with that?
Yeah. Yeah, she generally is. I think she gets a bit thrown when we don't have a routine. She even somehow seems to know what days are childcare days. So, for example, she usually goes to childcare on Monday, and we had a public holiday one Monday, and she kind of got up in the morning and ran over to where a childcare bag was and started tugging on it. I'm like, no, not today.
Wow. It's really interesting because it's going to sound terrible, but I have trouble kind of relating to small children because they're like little adults, but they don't have the reasoning capacity of adults.
No, reasoning capacity, yep.
But they're the size of cats or dogs, but they don't respond to that framework as well because cats and dogs are grown up cats and dogs. And I feel
they've got so cats and dogs have a more mature psychologically in a way.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they have a psychology I understand and can relate to, but I don't get babies yet.
Oh, neither do I.
Their communication, Maddie's communication is already far ahead of a small animal.
Oh, absolutely. She understands so much more probably than I even give her credit for. And I can see sometimes that she gets frustrated when she knows what she's trying to tell me and I'm just not getting it. because she hasn't quite developed that ability to form the right words or sentences necessarily, but she knows exactly what we're saying and exactly how she wants to respond.
Yeah, but she doesn't have like the coordination or even, I guess, survival instinct of an animal her size. Like she still runs into things. And
Yeah, she does still run into things. And I think, I don't know about reason. I don't know if you can really reason with pets per se, but you certainly can't reason with toddlers.
you can understand the motivations of pets.
Yeah, that's
They're
true.
much simpler.
It's generally their motivation is, I'm hungry, I'm cold.
Need attention.
Yeah.
I guess.
With toddlers, it's, I guess, probably need attention can cover a lot of it. But sometimes you're just like, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you need to know what kind of attention they need as well.
Yeah. Is it a quiet cuddle? Is it a play with me? Is it sing a song? Yeah, that's true.
Did you always want to have children?
No, I wouldn't say I did necessarily, because I think I probably didn't have a lot to do with small children, whereas some people I think might grow up, like they might be substantially older than their youngest sibling, for example, or they might have an older sibling who has a child, or they might just have cousins, or I don't know, some relatives, so they're around younger children, whereas, I mean, there were always kind of babies and young children around in the family, but I don't think I particularly had a lot to do with them. So I don't feel like I ever really had much experience in knowing how to interact with young children. So not always. And then there was probably after that, there was a point where I thought I sort of expected that I would have children at some stage.
Was that after you got with Andrew?
Yeah. Yeah, because we both knew that, like, broadly that, yes, we wanted children. We wanted a bigger family. Yeah.
Was there a point where you sat down with Andrew and started talking about having children? And what was that decision-making process to actually start trying? What was that like?
Oh, yeah, I do remember it, actually. I think we were out to dinner for my birthday. I think we'd sort of, you know, we both knew that we wanted children and we hadn't really talked about specifically trying. And I just kind of remember saying, look, I don't really think you ever know if you're ready. Like, you're never ready, basically. And I think, actually, I do remember what I said to him. I think I said, I don't want children because I want children. This is remembering. So it's not that I ever thought, I was never one of those people who thought, yes, I always want children and I'm going to have children no matter what. Like, regardless of whether I necessarily meet someone or whatever. I was never one of those people. But I realised that I wanted children with Andrew because I thought he would be a really great father and we'd be good parents together, and I wanted it as that family union. So in that sense, it was only after I met him.
Right. So
Yeah.
if you hadn't met him, you wouldn't necessarily be...
Who knows? Yeah.
Did he always want children?
I think so. Like, again, I think it's probably not something he spent a lot of time actively thinking about, but certainly from the time we got married, we both knew that we wanted children at some stage. At the time we started talking about it, he would have been happy to wait a little bit longer, but at the same time he was happy as well to start trying.
What were your ambitions when you were in high school?
Such a good question. I don't really feel like I've ever been particularly ambitious. Is that weird? Actually, I was asked that question in my first job interview, are you ambitious? And I'm pretty sure I said no. I don't know if that was the right answer.
Did you get that job?
I did. Yeah, that was my grad job. So I'm still working for the same company now. I guess I felt like I always knew I was going to do something. Like, I knew I was going to go to uni and I knew I was going to get a job, but I never had a particular aspiration about what that would be. Like, I didn't grow up going, oh, I want to do this in particular. So I've kind of just fallen into everything and just still muddling along.
That's an interesting thing to say because you're a high achieving person.
Yeah.
And I think you always have been. So
Yeah.
what were you You say you were muddling along, but you're muddling along at the top of the class with a high OP. Like, what were you muddling towards?
Well, I think it was more for the sake of muddling. Like,
do you get fulfillment just from being, among the best at something?
I think I don't want to do. I think I like being good at things, and I think I specifically avoid things that I'm not good at, which makes it harder and harder the older you get, because there's not that same kind of learning curve you naturally have, I feel like. So when you're a kid, you're not expected to be good at anything because you've never learnt how to do it. But now you're like a fully formed adult, you've learnt to walk and talk and whatever. So anything else is kind of a bonus. But I feel like I hate, I'm not really into doing things that I'm not good at. Like, I wouldn't take up painting or something because I know I'd be rubbish at it.
Is there anything beyond things like that would be a hobby? Are there any day-to-day things that you avoid doing because you don't think you'd be good at them?
I guess I used to avoid cooking a bit. Like, a number of years ago now, Andrew used to do most of the cooking. And since Maddie was born, that's definitely changed. Now I do most of the cooking. So it started when I was on maternity leave, just because I was at home. And now, just because of the way things work, I usually do most of the cooking. And I think I've gotten a lot better at it. And Andrew would say, oh, well, you were never bad at it. You just didn't like to do it.
Do you like doing it now?
Look, I don't mind cooking when I have the time. I don't enjoy it when I get home from work and it's just a chore. But on a weekend, I'd quite enjoy it if I've got the time. Whereas I think Andrew used to enjoy doing it after work. It kind of used to be his like relaxation, get home from work and cook. It's not the same for me.
That makes sense and if you really know what you're doing in the kitchen, I can imagine that being a relaxing thing. But if you're kind of like me and you're just frantically trying to follow all the steps and not overcook things and get the rice stuck to the bottom of the saucepan, then it's a bit more stressful.
Yeah, I think I tend to like specifically follow more recipes rather than just make things up. But at the same time, I also take shortcuts as well. Like, I won't cut everything and then specifically add it to the pan when it says, like, I'll cut one thing first, throw it in, and then frantically start chopping something else and throw it in, so it won't be all neatly prepared, read through the whole recipe. So sometimes I'll get halfway through, although sometimes I'll go, oh, this is what we're having for dinner tonight, and then I'll read the first step and it's like, marinate for 12 hours, and it'll be like 7:30 at night. I'm like, whoops.
I always forget to soak my lentils all day.
Oh, yeah.
And then I either put off cooking for another day or I just get a can. I always have an emergency can of something, of legumes I can use instead that don't need soaking.
Buy canned lentils now. I used to have like the
dry ones.
The dry ones, but no.
I'm the opposite. It's really hard to form new habits like that. Do you have any methods that you use for when you need to form a new habit?
I think sometimes the nature of habits is like, unless it's you're deliberately thinking, oh, that's a bad habit, I need to change that. Some habits just kind of evolve, I think. Like, I wouldn't say that I ever, like, our habit is that we meal plan, and we didn't always do that. There was a point where we just, I don't even know what we did, just randomly buy some things at the beginning of the week and then get to the end of the week and realise that you haven't used half the veggies and you're throwing them all out. So it just seemed like it seemed like this is the more logical way to do something. So we just started doing it, and
it wasn't hard?
Wasn't hard.
What's your commute to work like?
Varies from day to day. So some days I will catch the tram in, which is kind of slow and rambling, but I don't really mind because I just sit there and listen to a podcast. And actually, I can't look at my phone on the tram because I get a bit motion sick. So it's actually quite good because it forces me just to focus on listening to something rather than trying to do 25 things at once. So I'm not actually staring at my phone, but I'm still doing something. I'm not just like, I feel like I'm entertained.
What podcasts are you listening to at the moment?
I tend to listen to podcasts that tell me about all the other podcasts I should be listening to but don't have time to. So I listen to Chat 10 Look 3, which is Lee Sales and Annabelle Crabb, basically just chatting about what they've been doing in their life, so what they've been reading or watching or cooking or listening to. And often they'll talk about something and I'll go, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'd really like to read that or listen to that, and then promptly never get the time to do it. Yeah, so that tends to be things like that. So that's the days that I catch the tram. Some days I'll cycle to work, which is about, I think it's probably about 8 or 9 kilometres from here. So it's not a long trip. It's usually pretty good. It's just the cold and wet makes that a challenge sometimes in the morning. So
when I guess you're not listening to podcasts when you're cycling.
No.
What goes on in your head when you're cycling?
Trying not to get hit by cars.
So you're very in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment, but also I'm always thinking about my day or what I need to do. Like I think Andrew said the other night when he cycles, it's quite meditative almost. It's his kind of bit of mindfulness, whereas I'm not necessarily the same. Like I'll be trying to be aware of what's going on around me in terms of traffic and road conditions and everything, but also thinking about, probably what we've got to cook for dinner, if I've got to buy something for Maddie, if what I've got on for the day, composing an email, just kind of life stuff. And to be honest, that's what I think about in yoga class as well. So I'm not very good at the whole just being in the moment and letting, like I think you're supposed to think about it like leaves on a stream. Like it's okay if a thought comes into your head, don't fight it, but just let it go. And I'll let it go and the next one will come immediately. So I end up just thinking about 5 million things at once.
Do you think about work when you're at home?
Sometimes. Not all the time. And I think Maddie's probably helped with that because like she just forces herself to front of mind. But I do sometimes, particularly when it's busy and if I've had to leave before I've had a chance to do something, I'm certainly thinking about that. Like at the moment I'm thinking I didn't submit my timesheet on Friday, so I'm going to be on the naughty list.
Do you ever have to take work home?
Yeah, I do. And sometimes that's just because, so for example, on Monday I leave work at about 4:15, 4:30 to pick Maddie up. So obviously I've kind of not done a whole day, so I might do some at night. And that's always been the nature of my job. Like you never get to the end of the day and go, oh great, I've done everything, see you later. Nothing to do till tomorrow. There's just always things to do. And sometimes if it's particularly busy or if something's particularly urgent, I'll try and catch up. I won't do work at home if it can wait till the next day. But also now I work part-time. I only work 3 days a week and things can't really just stop because I'm not there for a day. So I do need to be checking my emails, making sure things are moving. I also work a lot with people overseas. So because of the time differences, sometimes you just need to be making sure that someone in Europe's responded, and in order to do that you need to be checking your emails at 9 o'clock at night. Otherwise, if you don't check them till you go in the next day, then you've lost a whole day because they're not online. So
what do you actually do?
Such a good question.
I know where you work, but I don't know what you actually... Someone asked me the other day and I couldn't answer what you did.
So at the moment, I advise companies on their employee share plans. And the other part of my role is global mobility. So advising clients from a tax perspective when they're moving people around the world. So the share plan part is something I've gotten into in the last couple of years. It's kind of stemmed from the other part, which is basically, do you know what a share plan is?
No.
So companies have shares. So
Like the company itself is made of shareholders, or that
Yeah.
companies have stakes in other companies?
no, a company is made of shareholders.
Yes.
So in order to generate capital, company will go, okay, hey, I'm going to sell you a portion of the business and you're going to give me some money for it.
Yep.
With the theory that that value of your stake in the business is increasing over time.
Yep.
So with employee share schemes, it's really a company offering a piece of the company to their employees.
Ah, okay.
And it can be an incentive to align the employees with the growth of the business. So really, instead of just saying, okay, I'm going to give you $100 of cash, regardless of how the business goes, just for the sake of it, if you say, okay, I'm going to give you $80 cash and $20 worth of shares, which if you can grow the business or if you meet certain targets, then those shares are going to be more valuable
Yeah, okay.
in time. And we really work all the way from the basic design. So a company comes to you and goes, oh, hey, I want to put in a share plan. What do I do? There's a lot of different types you can use depending on what the company is trying to achieve. So you really need to first understand, well, what's the purpose of this? What are you trying to achieve? And then through the actual drafting of the plan rules and the offer documents, communication to the employees, telling them what the tax implications are going to be, and then there's reporting you have to do to the government at the end of it. So kind of the full circle.
Is there any particular kind of company that tends to do this, or do all companies?
No, so some companies obviously don't. You have to, I guess public companies more so than private companies, but not necessarily. Private companies do it as well. The thing that I enjoy about it is, so when I worked from a global mobility perspective, is you tend just to be working with kind of multinational global corporations. Whereas share plans, yes, there are a number of like multinational corporations who are very sophisticated in terms of what they want, and we might just help them with a particular part of that. So they might have thousands of employees around the world, but on the other side, we work with companies who are startup companies. So, for example, biotech companies who might be pre-revenue. So basically, they don't have any money to pay their employees, but they think that they're developing a really great product. So they want to put in a plan that they can use to attract good people and retain good people. But even though they can't afford to compete financially with what they can offer to pay them, the idea that the shares are going to be worth more in the future. So it's really the whole range of companies.
If those little startups don't have any money, how do they pay your company to advise them?
Such a good question.
Or do they offer you shares as well?
No. No, and I guess that's where not necessarily the price, but the level of service can vary in terms of the budget of the company.
And that'll determine like how hands-on you are in...
Yeah, or how bespoke they want their plan to be. Like if they're happy to have... there's not really any such thing as just an off-the-shelf one-size-fits-all. But no, that is a very good question about how they actually pay us. And that might be... I guess that's certainly a cheaper investment in terms of getting us to put this arrangement in place than having to pay 20 employees an extra $20,000 each a year.
Do you enjoy your work?
I do enjoy it. I think everyone has days when, things will get to them. Office politics, clients being annoying. But in general, I've been at the same company for nearly 10 years now, albeit in various roles and various places around the world. So I wouldn't have stayed that long if I really didn't enjoy it.
You did an arts law degree after getting an OP2, I believe.
Yeah.
How did you decide where you wanted to work after uni?
I think that I knew that I didn't really want to be necessarily a lawyer per se, although what I do now certainly utilises a lot of those law skills. So I just applied for a bunch of graduate positions, got the one with EY. It sounded interesting, thought I'll give it a go, and kind of fell into it, really.
Were the things you were applying for, were they very different types of jobs?
To be honest, I don't even think I really understood what they all were. Like, I'm pretty sure I did apply for some jobs with law firms. I had an interview with a law firm. I had an interview with, like, Macquarie Bank, like investment bank. I don't actually know what that role was for. I assume I did at the time, or maybe that's why I didn't get it. But I remember that interview being like an interrogation. Like, they were sitting across from this woman and she just had a bunch of questions, bam, bam, bam. But even random questions like, what's 12 times 11? Not, you know, what do you consider your strengths and weaknesses? Whereas I remember the interview with EY kind of being more like a bit of a chat with the people I'd be working with. And obviously, like, they knew what my background was, and being a graduate position, it wasn't like they expected me to actually have relevant skills. They knew I'd obviously completed a degree, but I think what was most important was how I was actually going to fit in with the team. And now when I interview people, that's definitely part of what I try to do. So I try to just, like, yes, there are certain things you've got to capture and questions you've got to capture, but try to make it a bit more like a conversation, just to get to know that person and how well you think they'd fit in the environment, especially at that kind of graduate or vacationer level, because you know throughout the screening process that, like, they're not a muppet. They're going to, you would hope, they're going to be able to do the work. It's whether they have an interest in it, like a genuine interest in learning something, and whether you think they're going to fit in well with the team. Like, you can have someone who is really brilliant, but they also come across as quite arrogant, and they always just want to cut in front of someone else speaking so they can look like they've got the best word. And that's not necessarily who you want to work with in a team.
I think you said earlier you're not great at kind of dividing all the things you're thinking about. So, like, you're thinking about work at home, thinking about Maddie at work.
Yeah.
What coping mechanisms do you have for dealing with everything at once?
That's probably something I need to get better at. I've been trying really hard at work to focus on doing one thing at once, because I would often start writing one email and then start working on something else or talking to someone about something else. So I'd end up doing about 4 or 5 things at once, which is incredibly inefficient. So I've really tried to focus on, right, I'm going to start doing this one thing and I'm going to finish that completely before I move on to the next thing. And I think in doing that, that also helps me not to just go off on a tangent and start thinking about what Maddie's doing, or look up if I've paid my electricity bill or stuff like that. So I've made that deliberate attempt at work recently. I haven't made it at home, and I think that I could probably do that, because I tend to do something like, I'll start cleaning the kitchen and I'll get halfway through and then I'll go and hang my clothes on the line, or then I'll go and tidy Maddie's room, and then nothing ever gets properly finished.
I do that sometimes as well at home, but with kind of operating under the excuse that I think I'm actually being more time efficient, like by starting one thing that can continue independently, like saying something to cook on the stove or putting the washing machine on, then going to do other things and then forgetting about the thing that started.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's a false economy.
Yeah.
I mean, I always do that. Like, I'll get up in the morning, I'll throw a load of washing on, and while it's washing, I'll be making Maddie's breakfast, and then I'll start cleaning up and then hang the washing out. I guess washing's a bit different, but I think certainly the putting something on the stove is a false economy, because you tend to ruin or forget about what's there.
Do you have a lot of married friends?
Yes. I think probably I'm of an age where the majority of my friends are now married.
When you hear about your friends' lives, are there any things that make you think, oh, our marriage is really different to that? Oh, that's not how things work in our house. That's really interesting.
Yeah, there are, because every person is different. Every couple is different. And what I've been trying to do is not to mentally judge. And I think I've been really trying, particularly since having Maddie, to be less judgmental in general, because there's a lot that's kind of spoken about how everyone's always judging you on your parenting. So I've been trying to be really non-judgmental about when I see people with kids doing something. And similarly, when I see the way a couple interact together, to go, oh, we wouldn't do it like that. But just to try and be, okay, so what? Everyone's different, whatever. And I mean, there are always times when I do catch myself being judgy. Like, why would you name your child Poppet Schmock? Like, just, things like that. But I'm trying really hard to go, because I'm sure that a lot of the time I'd be doing something that people could easily judge me on. But the reality is you never know what anyone's life is like and what is going through their mind at a particular time. So it's been a focus.
Do you think you were a bit judgy before you had Maddie?
Yeah, probably, I would say. Yeah, like I'd like to think I'm not huge. I'd like to think that I was never that kind of person who would walk around telling people what they should be doing with their lives. But I think certainly in my head, and probably like to people I was with, I might be a bit judgy about other people. But that's something I've really been trying to avoid. And trying to avoid it also if other people say something to me about someone else, trying to kind of not just, because I'm also like a people pleaser, so not just agree with whatever they're saying, because I might actually think it myself, but trying to just go, you know what, like, who cares, or why are you even bringing that up, or think about it from the other point of view, like go, oh, but have you thought about this? Maybe they're just doing this. Like, people
pleasing is interesting. I think I've also traditionally been a people pleaser in terms of just going along with whatever people are saying. And but often I think, looking back, I think I didn't even realize that sometimes when I've been talking to people, I don't agree with what they're saying until later.
Yeah, I've probably done that as well, which it's just interesting, because I think that I feel like you're probably less of a people pleaser than I am, because I feel like you've always been more comfortable just to like do your own thing or say your own thing, or that's the way it's come across anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Like I'll definitely do my own thing, but I don't really think of myself as like calling someone out on something.
No, not calling someone out necessarily. No. But I think maybe I would like to try calling people out a little bit more. Like it's hard because, no one wants to be that person who's always arguing, like you can't have a conversation without them picking holes in everything you say. But I feel like also by calling out things like, casual racism, that people might actually become more aware of what they're saying. And I know that certainly there's things that I say myself that I call myself out on afterwards and go, that was really not very appropriate for whatever reason. So I just think thinking about it generally is probably not a bad thing. And also, even if you don't call people out on it because the situation doesn't really warrant that, but actually knowing in your own mind that you think that was inappropriate or wrong, or you disagree with it, and just being comfortable in what you actually think and having a viewpoint.
Yeah, I guess part of it is, growing older and realizing that everyone talking to you is not necessarily right about everything.
Yeah, exactly. And also I think that there are some people who just say things with such absolute confidence that, you kind of believe it as fact, whereas I tend to second guess or doubt everything I think is correct. So I'm pretty much the opposite of that. So I'm more likely to go along with those type of people.
Yeah.
Whereas it doesn't mean they actually, like if we're talking about actual facts, it doesn't necessarily mean they know more than me. Or if we're talking about opinions, well, everyone's opinion is equally valid. Just because they are more confident and more articulate in their opinion doesn't necessarily mean that I have to agree with it.
It's such a late lesson to learn, and it's
Such
so
a late
important.
lesson to learn.
like why aren't children taught, not to...
Because I think that children are almost taught the opposite, because they're taught, like, you go to school and what your teacher says is right. So you're taught to believe that whoever is in that position of authority, to believe and to do what they say. Like, you're not taught to question your teacher and talk back to them.
Are you going to try and teach Maddie differently?
Oh, I think she's already learnt. Yeah, I hope so. I guess as a parent, it's quite hard because you do need to have some discipline in there, particularly at this age. And that's like, just from fundamentally for safety reasons. Like, no, you cannot run onto the road. Like, you can't, I don't think it's possible just to let your child do whatever they want. But at the same time, I don't want to form her in the way that I think she should be, or in my likeness or anything. I want to allow her enough room to have her own personality and feelings and opinions.
But they do have to be a person who can function in society.
Yeah, she has to function in society. She has to be polite to people and, function in society, as you say. So it's trying to find that boundary, I think, is going to be a challenge as she grows up.
It's been really interesting just staying here the last couple of days. Like, you and Andrew will, have to sometimes, often for our own safety, being, oh, not over there, Maddie, not near the road, or nope, come down from there, don't touch that. But the time you spoke most strongly to Maddie was when we were out for a walk, and I didn't see, but you were behind me, but you said, no, we do not hit. And I assume she slapped you or something?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing we're working on at the moment, is that sometimes if we're holding her, she'll hit us in the face. And I haven't seen her do this to any other kids yet, so hopefully she doesn't. But she seems to think it's hilarious. And that's the one thing that we're really, really stern on. Don't hit. And I think, we walk around saying no, no, no constantly, which is not... It's not great. That's probably why she walks around saying no, 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 because she's heard us say it.
And I've not heard Maddie say yes, but I've heard her say no a lot.
Yeah, exactly. But I think there needs to be a distinction between, no, please don't throw your food off the table once or whatever, and no, you do not hit people, and a really stern message for, there's levels, right, of behaviour that and everyone's got different boundaries on what they're willing to accept. For example, I'm willing to accept her rummaging through the Tupperware cupboard, and yes, it's kind of annoying because I have to clean it up, but really it's not the end of the world. She's not hurting anything. Whereas some people would go, no, you just can't touch any of that. Whereas I'm not prepared to have her hit. So...
Have you become any more ambitious as you've grown older?
No, if anything, I've become less ambitious, I think.
So what are your plans for the future in the long term?
I feel like I should probably make some, but I've never really been a planner or a goal setter. And actually, I think possibly that's been because of fear of not meeting them. So fear of failure. So if I don't have goals, if I just kind of cruise along, then I can't not meet them.
You have a weird definition of cruising along as a high achiever.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, but I don't there are things I'd like to achieve. Professionally, I would like to get promoted to the next level.
Why?
Because I don't like to do anything halfway, I suppose. I'm not one of those people who will go, okay, well, I only work part-time. I'm just going to come in and do 9 to 5 and, check out at the door. And some people do that and they get a lot of validation from other areas in their life.
Present.
Yeah. So that's totally fine. That's just different personalities. Whereas I don't really have hobbies outside of work, so I do get validation from work. I guess the other main thing that takes up my time is Maddie, and kind of, being a parent is kind of thankless. Like, as great as it is, it's a pretty thankless task most of the time, especially at this age, a lot of the time. So yeah, it's just something where I feel like I'm getting validation that I'm good at something and I'm doing something beyond just being a mother. Because I mean, maybe this is a plan, because I've consciously thought I want to go back to work. I don't just want to be a stay-at-home mum. And my reason for that is, again, because I don't really have other things in my life that I'm passionate about, is that it would just be, my life would be my children, basically. And that's certainly enough to keep you incredibly busy, and it's great. But then I just feel like there'd come a point in time when they would go to school or become teenagers and they wouldn't need me. And then I'd just be left with this big hole, because that had been my whole life for 10 years.
And that wouldn't be healthy for either of you.
No, I don't think it'd be healthy for either of us. So I'm trying to find a balance, which is very difficult, because I've had people tell me, well, you know, look, when they're little, you just need to give work a back seat and just focus on them. But I'm conscious that if I just drop off work for 5 years or so, it's going to be very difficult to come back. I'm going to come back, and if I'm in the same role, people who are 10 years younger than me are going to be my boss, which happens. But I think I would find that awkward, because I am a high achiever. I don't want to do things halfway. And I also like having the adult conversation, and a conversation that's not just about children. Like, I do speak a lot about children and what they do in developmental stages, and that's good as well, because it gives me ideas. It helps me to think, oh, okay, yeah, it's pretty normal that she's doing this or whatever. But I want to talk about something else sometimes.
What else do you want to talk about?
Anything. Yeah, it's hard. Not hard, but I guess what I want to talk about now is, your show has been about habits and hobbies. I would like to talk about the absence of hobbies.
Yeah, because you don't really have any.
No. And at the moment I'm like, well, when do I have time to have a hobby?
Yeah, I can understand that now.
having seen my life.
Yeah, like the only spare time is when Maddie's put to bed, and then you might watch some TV.
Watch some TV, because to be honest, when that happens, when she's in bed, we're basically running around, eating our dinner, cleaning up after dinner, and then just collapsing and watching some TV for an hour before going to sleep, and doing it all again the next day.
But before you had Maddie, you didn't really have any hobbies either.
No, and that's what's interesting. So I can't say that, oh, it's all like, blame it on having a child. I no longer have hobbies.
Yeah.
I never really had hobbies.
How did you fill your time?
Very easily. I've always worked long hours. I've always kept myself very busy at work. Socialising. I don't think of that as a hobby, but certainly I'd enjoy having lunch or dinner with friends on the weekend. I did, it's not something we did all the time, so it felt like a hobby, but I'd enjoy like hiking, which is now really not at all feasible with Maddie. It was more feasible when she was little, because we just strap her in, but you'd still be quite limited in terms of how long you could go. But certainly not anymore. We are thinking of taking her camping soon, though, which I'd quite like to try.
You've always hated camping.
No, well, this is interesting. So yeah, as a kid, I'd always hated camping, but in the last few years, I've come to quite enjoy it. But I actually, the interesting thing is, so I think when we used to go camping when we were younger, we'd go to like a camping ground with, like people with caravans and the toilet block and whatever.
Water, yeah.
Yeah. And there would be a shop down the road or whatever. So I actually prefer real camping. Like in the bush, no bathroom, no running water, nothing.
Why do you prefer that?
Because if we're somewhere civilized and I'm camping, I just feel like,
why aren't I in a hotel up the road?
Yeah, exactly. Like really kind of uncomfortable. Like I just feel like, I always look like a schlob. Like I don't want to lug all my stuff to this communal bathroom. Whereas if you've got like nothing, then it's totally fine because everyone's like that. It's not like there are other people who are at a 5-star hotel down the road.
Do you enjoy kind of the survivalist aspect of it, of having to really fend for yourself?
No, we're not like catching grubs or anything. So
I mean, just having to bring like all your own stuff and not being able to go to the shops. Do you enjoy being resourceful like that?
Yeah, not so much the act of being resourceful, but I enjoy actually being away from that stuff. Like it feels like so to me, camping is being in the bush where you're not near a shop, you don't hear the road. Like camping at a beach where, there's other people all around. It's not actually, it's not the definition of camping for me. Camping is it's about being in the bush and being with nature and hearing the birds when you wake up and yeah.
Why do you think you didn't have any hobbies before? Why did you fill your time like just with more work, a bit of socialising?
I think I've never found anything that I was really passionate about. So it's not as if I've certainly tried hobbies in the past.
You were going to play drums with me in a band at one point.
Yeah, I was. I started learning French for a while in Melbourne.
Yeah.
Started going to French classes.
When you went to Europe.
Yeah, and I started doing it again after I came back. But I just found that it's easy. You say, I don't have the time to practice or whatever. But actually, if it's something that you're really passionate about, I think you make time, as is evidenced by Andrew and his 5 a.m. starts to do all his training. I've, played a bit of tennis. I played touch football for a time. Touch football, I think I had that feeling that I'm not very good at this. Yeah, so there have been things that I've tried, like I've done on and off, and I like to do things like that, particularly if there's a bit of a social aspect. But I think the fact is that I've never found anything I feel passionate enough about that I would make time to do, because it's about making time, really. It's not, you can fill your time with whatever. So
the times when you did do kind of big team activities like the touch footy, you did enjoy the social aspect of that, of meeting new people?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, but it wasn't something that I would look forward to every week. At the moment, I do trivia once a week. Is that a hobby?
Yeah, sure. Are you good at trivia?
We're pretty good.
Do you go to those themed ones like Game of Thrones trivia
No.
or anything? Just general pub
Just
trivia?
general pub trivia. We had a good one and then the pub became insolvent. So now we're going to another one where the standard of competition is not as high. So we do win a lot, which is good for us. But I think that I would like it if there was more competition.
You like a challenge?
Yeah. I don't like to be, I like to be kind of up there. I don't want something where it's so ridiculously hard that I feel like we never do well at all. But
you don't want an easy win?
Yeah. Yeah, there's less satisfaction from an easy win. It just becomes a bit embarrassing, really.
Do you have a special topic that you're particularly good at? Everyone looks to you in trivia?
Well, my trivia team, I'm the only native Australian. Others are originally British, now Australian citizens. So anytime there's a kind of like an Australian question, that is apparently my topic. Like some, Australian kids TV show that, not having grown up here, you'd never have heard of, or things like that. I find at trivia in Melbourne, there's often Melbourne questions, like questions about Melbourne suburbs or questions about AFL, which I consider a Melbourne question. So none of us are very good at that.
There are so many Brits living in Australia and so many Australians living in the UK. Do you reckon they have special trivia for, do you reckon they have British trivia for expats around Melbourne, and do you reckon they have Australian trivia in London?
Oh, I'm sure they do. It would not surprise me.
When you were in the UK, did you spend much time in those Australian pubs that they have?
No, deliberately no.
Do they attract a certain kind of people?
Yeah, probably.
Well, thanks for coming on, Mindy.
Thank you for having me.
So that's my sister Mindy for you. I hope you've learned some interesting things about parenthood and television binge watching and employee share schemes. I know I legit found the stuff about employee share schemes interesting. I had no idea that was a thing. Next week on the podcast, we'll have the other half of that household story as I talk to my brother-in-law, Andrew Hurst. I put the screws to him just a little bit, I think, in the chat that you'll hear next week. I think it's the job of a brother-in-law to do that, just a little. Andrew's great though. I'm really looking forward to you hearing that because I know who those two are as people, and I'll be fascinated to hear how you construct a household in your head based on just listening to two married people talk to me. Young Madeline was a little bit too little to participate in our podcast yet, although I think on the next episode you might hear her making a bit of noise in the background at some points. Do check out the Gimme Empathy Facebook page and like it to keep up with all the stuff and see photos of all my lovely guests. This past weekend, I attended the annual Sonic Masala Fest here in Brisbane at Club Greenslopes, which is it's a local music festival. I had such a good time there. It was so good. I really appreciate the people who put that festival on. I saw so many people I knew and I talked to them all, and including 3 past podcast guests. And it took hours, but eventually I tracked them all down and herded them all together and got a photo with them outside by the bowling green, and I put it up on the Facebook page. So I managed to get Josh Donnellan, Lisa Kundi, and Murray Bowler all together with me. That was really fun seeing them together because Josh and Murray probably met at some point before, but neither of them had met Lisa, and it was really entertaining. It was really cool having them come together, having listened to each other's episodes. I'd love to do something like that in the future, get more past guests together for... my ultimate dream is to do like a live show at some point, but I don't know how that's possible. But so yeah, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on your podcast thing of choice, and review us if that's an option. And send me an email at gimmeempathypodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear some of your feedback. I especially like constructive feedback. Like I run into people and they're like, "Oh, how's the podcast going?" Or, "Oh, yeah, I really like it." But I like detail. Like even if you have a problem with it, even if you hate my intros and outros, I want to hear that because I'm flying blind here. Flying blind. So until next week, stay blind. No, don't stay blind. What's the opposite of blind? Stay woke. Stay woke. Stay woke, everyone.